that we have chosen collectively as a community to guide us during the next year. Today they are diversity and inclusivity. Normally I would address each one separately because each one of them is a very big topic. However, they seem to me to be rather like yin and yang to one another, that diversity and inclusivity are very much the part of the same whole. So I wanted to talk about them today in that context. They're very linked. They're complementary. They belong to one another. So in a moment, I'll be asking you to share your views about why it's important for us to value diversity and inclusivity here at our center. But I want to talk first for a few minutes. I think that diversity in our culture today is very much misunderstood. I'm going to tell you a little story about over 20 years ago, I started work at a little company in a small town in Utah, which of course is predominantly Latter-day Saints or Mormon, and I was not. So not too long after I was hired, my boss told me that he had hired me to add diversity to the company. Yeah, I laughed too. I laughed too. Here I was straight from working in New York City, living there, and in acting, which, you know, a 40-something white woman is like a dime a dozen. And I was bringing diversity. It made me laugh. But what it did was it started me on a path of really understanding what diversity means. To this company, I was bringing something that they didn't have. I was bringing a way of being in the world and a way of believing that was a little foreign to this group of people. And over time, I really appreciated that, yes, I did bring diversity to that group. And I blessed them with that diversity. What I began to learn was that diversity is not about types. It's not about physicality. It's not about a lot of things that we think it is, but rather it's about something that is unique to each one of us, and that is the incredible set of genetics and cultural upbringing and education and experience that each one of us is. So that, in truth, every single one of us brings diversity to the party. The diversity comes from the same root word as the word divide. Inclusivity comes from the word include. These two words, again, are like yin and yang. Divide and include. They're forever linked. And rather than feeling opposite of one another, together they create a whole system. So that's the way I've approached my thinking today about diversity and inclusivity. And I really want to hear from you. These values came collectively from this group who answered the cultural survey, and 79 of us did that, representing for the whole group of us what our values are. So who would like to comment on these two wonderful, wonderful values, diversity and inclusivity? Yes, Preston.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Molly. It just settled in my spirit when you mentioned that, and the first thing I saw was every snowflake is completely different. But when you look at the landscape, they look all the same. And I admit I used to be, even though I'm a minority, used to be very judgmental because of the upbringing that I had in the age group and demographics and peer pressures and all that. But then when I closed my eyes and realized that just like the snowflake, that we're all the same. From the same being and the same inside, and started the same way. So that's what my picture of inclusive is. Diversity.
Oh, thank you. Every snowflake is different. Every single snowflake. And you know how many snowflakes are going to fall over the next couple of months? Everyone is different, yes.
I think true diversity is diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, which comes from diversity of background, diversity of culture, which stimulates all of us to have greater compassion, greater love, which expands our consciousness.
Thank you. Diversity to me is just walking in a room and never being a stranger. You walk into a room no matter who's there, what country you're in, what language they speak, what religion, you just feel a home akin with them, and that you know that you've had a lot of similar experiences, a lot of scary things happen to you, excuse me, no matter what. We're just all, on the same level in some way.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm actually not a member here, but I've been here a few times and I've really enjoyed it. And I thank you for your talk today. To me, diversity, and you're right, it's yin and yang. And the diversity is in all of our experiences, we all bring something to the table. But to include, that means we have to accept. And the acceptance for me has been a lifelong journey, because judgment is part of the human experience. Anyone that says they don't judge is not telling the truth. We judge all the time. I like your green. That's a judgment. So all of our diversity is so important to bring experiences to learn from each other. We have to have that, but we have to have acceptance and accept our judgments as well. To own our judgments, because that allows us to accept other people and say, I'm judging you for something, but teach me about that. Accept and teach me. I'm open to learning from your diversity. So that's bringing what you're talking about into action. So the first thing is I have to accept that I have judgment because I'm a human, and then learn from what everybody else is bringing to the table. So you are so right that it's that yin and yang, but I have to first look at me, own what's going on with me, and then I can be inclusive of all the other diversity.
Yeah.
All the other snowflakes.
You just gave my talk for me. I'm going to sit That was brilliant. Everybody has spoken. It's powerful, these concepts. And sometimes these don't feel like safe topics. So thank you for making this a safe room.
Although we live in the same country, we're in a country of all different countries. That's how America was built, as everyone came to here. So what I advocate is that we treat each other as foreigners, even though we're in the same country. And when you treat each person like they're a foreigner, then you're able to, in a sense, visit another country by getting to know each person and their roots and where they're from. So as a result of treating everyone as a different country, you're actually living in the whole world by treating everyone like they're a different country or a foreigner to you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a great approach. There's one more, John.
If you recognize both, you can't deny the whole.
Oh, very good. Very good. So that's what we're all about. There's only one. We are one. I'm Janice, and I'm not a member here either, but one of the reasons I'm here is because of the inclusiveness that I feel here, having come from a religious setting where I didn't really experience that for most of my years. But I did read something that I like to adhere to when I think about myself, the judgment that we cast, is that if we are truly not being inclusive, appreciating the diversity, we should drop our prejudices by dropping our assumptions about people and listening to somebody else and learning their story. So I think it's a beautiful thing to hold on to, and it's a wonderful thing about this community that I'm just learning about. So thank you. Whew. That was very filling to hear all of you. So each one of us wants to honor others and to be honored for the unique set of skills, ideas, and experiences we bring. Diversity is not about race, although in our culture it sure seems to be sometimes. It's not about whether you're gay or straight, although in our culture it sure seems to be. Diversity is about recognizing your stunning uniqueness. Yes, the color of your skin is part of your uniqueness. Whether you're a man or a woman is part of your uniqueness. Whom you choose to love is part of your uniqueness. So is where you live and what you've lived through and what you've learned and what you think. So who brings diversity to a culture? You do. You do. And each one of us wants to be included and understood as being a part of the whole, the body of God. We are here as the body of the divine one itself. That's inclusivity. How could you be anything but included if God is all there is? Where could you ever go to be not included, really? So when we can get to that point and hang on to it and stand there, then it doesn't matter what's out there coming in as far as judgment, as far as incorrect thinking, as far as the general craziness that we run into in our culture. So these ideas are very complementary and very reasonable to me. Are they reasonable to you? Diversity and inclusivity? They are to me. And yet, when I look at, in order to enter into creation, the divine creative force has moved itself into becoming, and it has never done the same thing twice. Everything, just like those snowflakes, everything has a unique individual stamp on it, and it all comes from the same source, the Creator itself, the creative substance that comes to life as you and me. And yet, the Hutus hate the Tutsis. The Sunnis hate the Shiites. The Christians hate the Muslims. The right hates the left. Young black men spend their lives in jail. Women are raped. Gay people are beaten. Children are bullied. How does all this happen in a world where diversity and inclusivity seem so reasonable? I think it's because of where we are in our evolution as a species. I go back to that darn limbic brain, that darn reptilian brain, which is what's handed down to us from the very first animal life. We still have the same brain, that limbic brain. And what it is, it's the fear brain. It's that which looks around and says, that which doesn't seem like me, I must be afraid of. I must either kill it or run away from it. And so what are we doing? We're looking for sameness when we use that brain. We're looking for sameness. And yet what are we talking about? There is no such thing as sameness. Yes, we're all people, but that's the end of the story right there. Beyond that, each one of us is so incredibly unique. And yet this part of our brain searches our environment to find what's same. And then we make factories so that we can produce same. We have a saming quality about us as human beings, don't we? We try to make things match what we think and feel inside, which is the antithesis of diversity and inclusiveness. That brain, I tell you, it requires a conscious application of a different kind of thought to move beyond it. All I can tell you are my stories because they're the only ones I know, really. When I was in ministerial school, there was a woman who was a couple of years ahead of me, and I just thought she was fabulous, and I so wanted to be her friend. But she was very aloof, and she really kept her distance from me, and I couldn't figure it out because I'm a pretty friendly gal, and I work hard sometimes when I want to be friends with someone. But still, she kept this distance, and so I labeled her as stuck-up. And I was okay with that, I was trying to match that, it's not me, it's her, she's stuck up. And then after a long time of, having meals together and sharing, she said to me, I had to find out if you were going to burn my house down. And then she told me her story. She grew up in Alabama, and as a child in the 60s, her father kept a shotgun by the door because they never knew when a pickup load full of white men were going to come and create mischief, i.e. burn their house down. So she had this inside her, this experience that in my naivete labeled it stuck up. And she was coming from a situation from, as a child, she was threatened. Of course she learned that white people cannot be trusted. For me, that made a major shift in my heart, and I've never forgotten it, and I've thanked her so many times for that. Because what it taught me was that I can't same other people. I can't try to find, I can't assume that what is my experience is their experience. That I must find out what other people's experience is. I know, I will never label anybody else stuck up again, because I know that what's underneath that is a rich and powerful story that is there for me to find out, if I will do it. It takes work, doesn't it? There's something really easy about saming. We can just same other people and go, oh yeah, we go to the same hairdresser, we have that in common. So we're alike, you know? Or we'll come up with 3 or 4 things and go, oh, another Virgo. I know who you are. That's saming. And yet the fact that we match our birth signs doesn't mean anything as to who you are. What diversity you bring to the table. And when I'm engaged in saming, I wonder why I'm so lonely. Awareness to be able to look at the people around us who don't share the same DNA, or the same experiences, or the same gender or generation that we do, and to learn to consciously seek out and celebrate the differences. To consciously disempower the saming brain that we each have, and to go out beyond to our differences, to see our oneness. It takes really walking in one another's shoes. I have a dear friend, a male friend, who I have argued many times with the status and equality of men and women in our culture today. I won't tell you which side I argued. But, you know, we've gotten quite upset with each other a number of times. And recently he told me a story about himself. He said he'd gone through some pretty crippling physical changes. And he was not able to get around like he used to. You know, it was hard to ride his bike and hard to stand on his feet for long periods of time. And one time he said that he'd learned something about that. He said, up until now, I've never even given it a thought. He's always been a big, strong man in the world, and never have ever felt the idea of being threatened or vulnerable to attack. And he said, I understand now what women have felt every day of their lives, this sense of vulnerability and being, you know, when confronted by a big, strong man, the fear that is involved in that. And so what shifted for him was he got a little bit of an inkling as to what women actually go through, and it changed his mind about some things. Again, it's walking in each other's shoes, finding out who each other are. And it was a profound experience for him in understanding the differences between men and women. See, many of us still think that honoring diversity and inclusiveness means treating everybody the same way. That doesn't work. That's the saming again, you know. Well, if I just treat people who are different than me exactly the same, as I would anyone else, then that'll solve the problem. But it doesn't. In a way, it takes away from that person's experience when we try to same them. That it is not until we dig deep and really uncover the richness of each other's lives. It takes a lot less work, again, to treat everybody the same. But what it does is it cuts out the richness of personal experience. It is gloriously ineffective if diversity and inclusiveness are important to a culture. It takes deep curiosity about one another and fearlessness to ask deep questions of one another, and the commitment to listen to the answers and hold judgment back. Did anybody here know who Rocco Errico is? You may have read him in the Science of Mind magazine. He's a biblical scholar, and he studies from the Aramaic, which is the language that Jesus spoke in. And I remember hearing him lecture one time, and I was so taken by what he told me about this one particular phrase. See if you can remember it. Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Wow. The Aramaic version is this. Be ye inclusive, even as God is inclusive. What a difference. What would it be like if we all stopped trying to be so darn perfect and instead tried to be more inclusive? Wow. So I'm going to close with a couple of quotes from Ernest Holmes, which I just love. Behind all is a unity, through all is a diversity, saturating all is a divinity. Elsewhere he wrote, Science of Mind has a universal concept of God. It thinks of the divine spirit as flowing through everything, personalizing everything, giving warmth and color to everything. Spirit meets with spirit and communes with itself, even in our ordinary conversation. Never overlook nor underestimate this all-inclusive attitude. So let's go into prayer with that, shall we? I just spend a moment and I remember who and what it is I call God these days. It's an underlying, permeating sense of goodness. The feeling behind the phrase, all is well. It's what Emerson called that which lies in smiling repose. It's what Emma Curtis Hopkins called good. That sense of the plus sign, the affirmative, all that is affirmative and good. That's what I call God. And it's very personal to me as well. It is also the feeling of love, the feeling of peace, of order, of abundance, and all of those positive plus sign feelings. That's God in me, as me. And what I remember when I do that is that I am a part of it. God is truly all there is, therefore that is me as well. That I have access to all of that good at any time I can turn my thinking toward it. So I do that now. And I allow all of life to unfold for me as good. I invite each of you to let my words be your words. And allow life to unfold in all of its glory and goodness. So even when I look and I see this illusion of pain and suffering, which is as real as it is supposed to be, I know that underneath that is a spiritual truth of love, of joy, of peace, and that's what I go for. Yes, I see that which seems like it isn't good, and I choose away from that. I choose good all the time. That's my job, to be here and choose good. So I do that today as I think about my world and my life, my family, my friends, this community. I choose good. I see good. I accept good. Everywhere I look, I accept light and life and love. I dare to watch the news and I proclaim light and life and love, even then. Because I believe with my whole heart that this is the truth about the world. This is the truth about life. It is good. And so I'm grateful, for I know that when I choose good, I give permission to others to choose good as well. And I'm so grateful for that.